On this week's Political Figure episode, we got the John Leguizamo lookalike in Congress, Representative Jimmy Gomez. Jimmy was born November 25th, 1974. Happy belated birthday, Jimmy. I wish I knew that when we had you on the podcast the other day. Speaking of which, Let the Meat Toast podcast, you can go watch the newest episode with him. In Riverside, California, to working-class immigrant parents. After high school, Jimmy had little interest in attending college, but did eventually start taking some classes at Riverside Community College, eventually transferring to UCLA, where he got a degree in political science, and then went to fucking Harvard, where he got a master's in public policy. Doesn't it piss you off when somebody who didn't even want to go to college ends up more educated than you? Fucking bullshit. Jimmy would go on to start a career as a union labor organizer, an advocate for frontline nurses, and an advocate for renters, because while rent is expensive everywhere, apparently it's really fucking expensive in California. In 2012, Jimmy decided to run for office and was elected to the California State Assembly in California's 51st District. The following year, he became the House Majority Whip and used his whipping powers to fight for paid family leave, women's rights, environmental justice, and immigrants' rights. After a few years in the state assembly, he decided to toss his hat in the ring for the 2017 special election for California's 34th district for U.S. House of Representatives, which he won and then went on to win the general election the following year. And after filling his seat in Congress, he joined the Progressive Caucus and has hit it out of the park on almost every issue you would hope a politician would be batting for as an American citizen. He has fought and voted for environmental and climate justice, supports the Green New Deal, and has a 98% rating from the League of Conservation Voters. He strongly advocated and voted for women's rights to health care and bodily autonomy. He introduced legislation in 2021 to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene from the House of Representatives, which she probably is wishing he would have been successful at now. It'd be a lot less embarrassing for her than the way she's going out at the moment. He supports taxing billionaires, supporting working class families, has stood up against tax on immigration, healthcare, and has received a score of 100 from the Human Rights Campaign for his support of human and civil rights. In fact, the only place where I would really like to see some improvement from Jimmy is on the subject of Israel and Gaza, but credit where it's due, he was one of the very first people to call for a ceasefire. He has called for Netanyahu to resign, supports a two-state solution, and he has repeatedly advocated and voted for getting the aid to Palestinians that they desperately need, and that is being withheld. All that said, and all of the credit where it's due, he has taken money from AIPAC, and that's not cool, and that is the one thing I do hope he improves upon and stops doing, especially in light of current events and his vocal stance against the atrocities that Israel is committing. But the reason I'm featuring him today and had him as our most recent guest on the podcast is because he just released a bill that I am a huge fan of. When it comes to addressing the issues that struggling Americans are facing, housing is at the top of the list. Americans can barely afford to keep a roof over their head and food on their table, and every single time we talk about addressing these issues, the dissenters are always like, who's gonna pay for it? Well, Jimmy, who sits on the Ways and Means Committee, decided he'd answer that question by writing a bill that would get that money by melting some ice. The Make Housing Affordable and Defend Democracy Act seeks to help people get into houses by giving first-time homebuyers and first-generation homebuyers a first-time homebuyer credit of up to and even over $60,000. It would help relieve the financial burden on renters by giving a renter tax credit to renters who are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. In places where rent far exceeds wages, this would help struggling families keep a roof over their head and stay in their communities. It would encourage home builders to build starter homes with a 15% credit for every starter home they build, and upping it to 30% for every starter home that they build and sell to a first-time home buyer. It would utilize a 20 to 35% credit to encourage builders to convert existing space into affordable housing, and it would bolster the low-income housing tax credit. And all of these things would make major strides towards helping first-time home buyers and working-class Americans afford housing and get a house of their own. But then there's the question, how do we pay for it? It's not like these are billionaires who desperately need another yacht. They're gross poor people, and we just don't have the money for those. But we can get it, and it doesn't even involve raising taxes. See, the party of fiscal responsibility gave $175 billion with a B wasteful spending slush fund to ICE and Border Patrol. This is $175 billion slush fund that has nearly no oversight that ICE and Border Patrol can just use for whatever the fuck they feel like. Razor wire in the rivers, no bid contracts to build concentration camps like Alligator Auschwitz, terrorizing our own communities. So this bill says, hey, why don't we just take that $175 billion away from the incels and masks cosplaying as federal agents and use it to help hardworking Americans afford the roof over their head? Now, you may be looking at this bill and be like, well, all that sounds great, but in this congressional makeup, it doesn't stand a snowball's chance in Florida, which is like hell, but much worse. And while you're probably right, we've got a chance to change that congressional makeup come the midterms, sometimes, and bills take a while to get there. So this does stand a chance if we vote right in 2026. But even if it doesn't get passed, introducing and supporting bills like this are incredibly important. Bills like this offer practical solutions to real problems Americans are facing right now. And it gets people talking about it. It normalizes the idea of legislation that actually helps working class Americans. And when bills like this do go to a vote, it forces members of Congress to go on record of whether or not they support it or don't. And that allows us to go to the primaries and vote out people who don't support us. And it also allows us to go into competitive campaigns with more knowledge and ammunition on what politicians are going to vote and work for us. And that's why we need more representatives writing more legislation like this, and that's why I'm taking my time to talk about it today. So a big shout out to Representative Gomez for putting in the effort on this, and I hope that all of you encourage your representatives to support it and start writing similar legislation as well. Because the more members of Congress that start putting out legislation like this means the closer we will get to actually getting that legislation passed.